He tricked me into aiding one of his insurance scams, then let my mom's claim get denied as collateral damage. When I finally confronted him, he just smiled and said, "I told you we were building something real. You just didn't ask what." I stayed quiet. That was a year ago. Last week, I got a flash drive in the mail labeled The Beginning. It only contained a diorama of our dorm room and my mother's hospital bill. Ever since I married Dallas, his mother Laura made it clear I ranked somewhere between a fungal infection and the gum stuck under a theater seat. For 5 years, she treated me like I was a participation trophy her son accidentally brought home. She'd forget to set a place for me at dinner, introduce me as Dallas's roommate to her friends at our anniversary party, and kept a shrine to his ex-girlfriend in her guest room, complete with candles and what I swear was a lock of hair. But here's the thing, Dallas had learned. After years of therapy and me threatening to leave, he'd finally started standing up to her. He'd correct her when she called me Amy. My name is Rachel. And he even defended me when she suggested I take a How to Be Less Disappointing seminar for Christmas. I thought we'd turned a corner. I thought we were a team. Then I peed on a stick and everything changed. The moment those 2 pink lines appeared, Laura transformed faster than a werewolf at a buffet. Suddenly I wasn't that thing Dallas married. I was the sacred vessel carrying my legacy. She threw me a baby shower that probably violated several federal spending limits, hired a photographer to document my journey to motherhood, and literally moved into our guest room with color-coded pregnancy binders. She'd already named the baby, Reginald if a boy, Prudence if a girl, and ordered monogrammed everything. "Glam Ma knows best," she'd say, referring to herself in third person while pressing her ear to my belly, whispering Harvard dreams to my fetus. "Don't worry, precious one. Glam Ma will make sure you overcome your mother's unfortunate genetics." And Dallas? He just smiled and said, "Isn't it nice she's finally warming up to you?" During my prenatal appointments, Dallas would be on his phone constantly. "Work stuff," he'd mutter. For 8 months, I was treated like a prize cow at the state fair, pampered, photographed, and fed until I couldn't see my feet. Laura tracked my water intake on spreadsheets, hired a nutritionist to analyze my diet for breast milk quality, and installed cameras in the nursery for safety. I kept waiting for Dallas to step in, but he was too busy basking in the fake harmony to care. Baby Mackenzie arrived, and Laura's interest in me dried up faster than a well in the desert. The moment they cut the umbilical cord, I became invisible again. While I was still trying to come out of the fog, Laura had already enrolled Mackenzie in 3 preschools. She'd burst into our house at 6 a.m. with proper supplies, because mine were contaminated with mediocrity. When I tried to breastfeed, she'd hover with a stopwatch saying, "The Academy of Pediatrics recommends switching sides every 12.5 minutes. By month 2, she'd installed a nursery in her house nicer than ours. Dallas kept disappearing for coffee runs whenever she visited, leaving me alone with her lectures. "You're too hormonal," he'd say when I complained. The breaking point came at Mackenzie's first birthday. Laura threw a party that looked like Versailles had a baby with a Pinterest board. She invited 200 of her friends, rented actual peacocks, and gave a speech about how she'd overseen the creation of perfection. I was hiding in the bathroom when I heard her tell her book club, "Once we get Mackenzie into boarding school, we can work on finding Dallas a more suitable mother for her." This one was basically just a rental uterus. That's when it hit me like a ton of organic, non-GMO bricks. I wasn't a person to Laura. I was a human easy-bake oven that had served its purpose. And my husband had watched it all happen with a smile. I kicked that bathroom door open like I was in a low-budget action movie. "Everyone out! Party's over!" Laura clutched her pearls so hard they turned to dust. As people were leaving, I turned to Dallas and said, "This woman used me like a rent-a-womb and you let her." Dallas finally looked up from his phone. "Honey, let's not make a scene." I laughed and explained, "Your mother has been treating me like a brooding mare she's about to sell for glue, and you're worried about a scene?" Laura fainted dramatically onto the couch. When no one went over to check on her, she started monologuing like some Bond villain. "Glam Ma has done nothing but support this family." My hands shook and my voice cracked, but for the first time in 6 years, I felt like a person instead of a walking uterus. I was done being Laura's incubator. I told her I was finally done with their crap and to get out. Dallas ended up leaving with her, hammering another nail through my heart. That night, after I'd swept up peacock feathers and thrown away 200 champagne flutes, I found an envelope on my car. Inside were custody papers. Laura was suing for grandparental rights due to my hostile parenting. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the signature at the bottom. Right next to Laura's name, in familiar handwriting, was my husband's signature, dated 3 months ago, when I was still pregnant, when he'd held my hand during ultrasounds and promised we were a team, when he'd looked me in the eyes and lied. I sat in my car staring at those papers until my vision blurred. 3 months ago, while I was 7 months pregnant, waddling around like a penguin and painting the nursery yellow because we wanted it to be a surprise, while Dallas rubbed my feet and told me how lucky Mackenzie would be to have me as a mother. The dashboard clock showed 11:47 p.m. Through the living room window, I could see the remnants of the party, deflated balloons, scattered confetti, and a cake shaped like a castle that Mackenzie never even got to taste. My phone buzzed with texts from party guests asking if everything was okay. I turned it off. Inside, I found more papers on the kitchen counter. Not just custody documents, but medical forms, daycare applications, insurance changes, all dated during my pregnancy, all with Dallas's signature. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. Laura had been added as an authorized guardian. My name had been systematically removed from emergency contact lists. I climbed the stairs to Mackenzie's room. She slept peacefully in her crib, tiny fist curled against her cheek, completely unaware that her world was fracturing. The nursery camera's red light blinked steadily. I unplugged it and threw it in the trash. My phone rang from downstairs, Dallas's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail 23 times that night. Each time I focused on packing. First Mackenzie's things, diapers, formula, her favorite stuffed elephant, then mine, whatever would fit in 2 suitcases. The rest could rot. By 3 a.m., I'd loaded everything into my car. Mackenzie barely stirred when I buckled her into her car seat. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Dallas's car turning onto our street. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I drove to my sister Emma's apartment 40 minutes away and knocked until she answered, bleary-eyed and confused. Emma took one look at my face and pulled us inside without questions. She made up the couch while I settled Mackenzie in the spare room. Only then did I finally check my phone. 57 missed calls. Texts ranging from, "Please come home," to "You're being irrational," to "Mom's lawyer says you can't just take her." The next morning, Emma watched Mackenzie while I met with the only lawyer who'd see me on short notice. Patricia Reed Reeves worked out of a strip mall office between a nail salon and a tax preparer. She reviewed the papers while I explained everything: the treatment, the pregnancy, the conspiracy. Patricia set down the documents and removed her glasses. She told me this was sophisticated planning. The dates, the timing, the gradual removal of my parental rights. It showed long-term intent, but she said we could fight it. The first step was establishing my fitness as a parent and documenting everything. I spent the next 3 days in a haze of legal preparation. Emma took time off work to help with Mackenzie. I pumped beer-assed milk between meetings, answered hundreds of questions about my pregnancy and delivery, signed forms until my hand cramped. Dallas kept calling. Laura sent a process server to Emma's apartment. The papers accused me of parental alienation and emotional instability. On day 4, I returned to the house while Dallas was at work to get more of our things. The locks had been changed. A note on the door said to contact Laura's attorney for access to my belongings. I took photos of everything: the locked door, the note, my key not working. Evidence, Patricia said. Document everything. The divorce papers came next. Dallas cited irreparable differences and concerns for child welfare. He wanted primary custody with supervised visitation for me. The financial documents showed he'd been moving money for months. Our joint savings depleted, assets transferred. While I'd been growing our child, he'd been planning my exile. I started a notebook, writing down every memory I could recall of Laura's behavior, Dallas's complicity, their coordinated actions, the time Laura measured my belly and said I was carrying too low for optimal development, how Dallas always had emergency work calls whenever I needed support, the way they'd exchange looks over my head like I was a problem to be managed. Patricia filed our response to the custody petition. We requested immediate temporary orders maintaining joint custody. The court date was set for 2 weeks out. 2 weeks to prove I was a fit mother while living on my sister's couch, pumping milk in bathroom stalls between job interviews because Dallas had frozen our accounts. Mackenzie started crawling during those 2 weeks. She pulled herself up on Emma's coffee table and took sideways steps while holding on. I videoed everything, building a catalog of moments to prove my involvement. Look, I wanted to tell the judge, I'm here for all of it. I'm not missing anything. I'm really curious what Dallas was actually doing on his phone during all those prenatal appointments. Work stuff seems like such a convenient excuse when your mother is basically treating your pregnant wife like a breeding animal, but Dallas had videos too. Laura had been recording through those nursery cameras for months. Footage of me crying from exhaustion at 3 a.m., clips of me struggling to soothe Mackenzie during colic episodes, selectively edited moments that painted a picture of an overwhelmed, incompetent mother. The court date arrived like a storm system, inevitable and destructive. I wore my only suit, the one from before pregnancy that barely fit. Patricia had coached me on what to say, how to present myself. Stay calm, stick to facts, don't let them provoke you. The courtroom smelled like old coffee and disappointment. Dallas sat with Laura and their legal team, 3 attorneys in suits that cost more than my car. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Laura wore pearls and the expression of wounded dignity, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. The judge, a tired-looking woman named Henderson, reviewed the initial petitions. Laura's attorney went first, painting me as unstable, hostile, and vindictive. They had witness statements from party guests describing my meltdown. They had the nursery footage. They had financial records showing I'd abandoned the marital home and depleted marital assets, the $400 I'd taken from our joint checking. When Patricia stood to respond, she focused on the timeline, the premeditated nature of the documentation, the systematic removal of my rights during pregnancy. She submitted my evidence, the changed locks, the hidden financial transfers, the custody papers signed while I was pregnant. Judge Henderson asked Dallas directly why he'd signed custody papers before our child was even born. He shifted in his seat, glanced at his mother, then mumbled something about being prepared for all eventualities. The judge's expression suggested she wasn't buying it. We recessed for lunch. In the courthouse bathroom, I pumped milk while Patricia reviewed notes. My body still functioned like a mother's even as they tried to legally erase me. The milk went into storage bags I'd keep in Emma's freezer, evidence of my continuing care. The afternoon brought character witnesses. Laura's friends testified about her dedication to family, her charitable work, her experience raising children. They spoke about me like I was a surrogate who'd gotten confused about her role. One actually said, "We all knew Laura would be the real mother figure." My witnesses were fewer but fierce. Emma testified about my devotion to Mackenzie, the way I'd memorized every cry, every need. My friend Sarah from prenatal yoga described how I'd researched everything, prepared endlessly, loved deeply. The daycare worker from the Mommy and Me class confirmed my regular attendance and engagement. By 4 p.m., Judge Henderson had heard enough for the temporary orders. She granted joint legal custody, but gave Dallas primary physical custody with a graduated visitation schedule for me. 3 hours supervised, 3 times a week, building to unsupervised visits after a month if no concerns arose. I sat frozen as she explained the ruling. Supervised visitation, like I was dangerous, like I needed watching. Patricia squeezed my shoulder, whispered that this was just temporary, we'd keep fighting. But I could see Laura's satisfied smile, Dallas's relief. They'd won the first round. The supervision center was a converted house near the courthouse. Cheerful murals couldn't mask the institutional smell, the cameras in every corner, the way other parents avoided eye contact in the waiting room. We were all there for the same reason. Someone had convinced a judge we couldn't be trusted with our own children. My first visit was scheduled for the next day. 3 hours to prove my worth as a mother while a stranger took notes. I arrived early, pacing the parking lot, rehearsing normal mother-child interactions in my head. When Dallas's car pulled up, Mackenzie was asleep in her car seat. He handed her over without speaking, along with a diaper bag I'd never seen before. Laura's selection, no doubt. Inside the supervision room, I sat on the floor with Mackenzie while a woman named Janet observed from a chair. Every move felt scrutinized. Was I holding her correctly, playing appropriately, responding properly to her needs? Mackenzie, confused by the strange environment, clung to me and cried. Janet wrote something in her notebook. 3 hours stretched like taffy. I sang songs, read books, changed diapers under observation. When Mackenzie finally relaxed enough to play, our time was up. Dallas waited in the lobby, scrolling his phone. I kissed Mackenzie goodbye, promised I'd see her soon, handed her back like she was borrowed property. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and sobbed. Not the pretty tears of movie mothers, but ugly, body-shaking sobs that left me gasping. A text from Patricia reminded me to journal about the visit while it was fresh. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. Emma made dinner that night, but I couldn't eat. I pumped milk, labeled it with date and time, added it to my growing freezer stash. My body didn't know I only saw my daughter 9 hours a week. week now. It kept producing, expecting a baby who wasn't there. The second visit went better. Mackenzie recognized the room, settled faster. Janet nodded approvingly when I'd anticipated a diaper change before Mackenzie fussed. Small victories measured in checked boxes on an evaluation form. Dallas started dropping her off without coming inside, leaving the handoff to the center staff. Patricia filed motions for expanded visitation, for financial support, for access to my belongings. Each filing cost money I didn't have. Each hearing meant time off from the part-time job I'd found at a medical clinic. The legal bills grew like cancer cells, multiplying beyond control. Week 2 brought a new development. Laura filed for grandparent rights, citing her established relationship and primary caregiver role. Her attorney submitted photos from my pregnancy. Laura at every appointment, hosting the baby shower, setting up the nursery. They documented her involvement like evidence for a future trial, because it was. I started recognizing patterns in their strategy. Every kind gesture during pregnancy became proof of Laura's dedication. Every moment of exhaustion or struggle became evidence of my inadequacy. They'd been building their case while I built our baby, and I'd been too naive to see it. The supervised visits continued. Janet's reports noted my appropriate interactions, but also mentioned Mackenzie's adjustment challenges. Of course she was struggling. Her world had exploded. But in the language of custody evaluations, a crying baby became evidence against the non-custodial parent. Patricia suggested I attend parenting classes to show initiative, so I spent Tuesday nights in a community center with other parents, learning skills I already had, getting a certificate to prove I could care for my own child. The instructor, well-meaning but clueless, talked about rebuilding trust, like I'd done something wrong. Dallas finally responded to my requests for belongings. He'd packed some clothes, some books, nothing sentimental. My jewelry box was missing, the photo albums absent. When I asked about them through Patricia, his lawyer claimed they couldn't locate them. Laura probably had them in her shrine room, adding to her collection. Week 3 brought the financial hearing. The judge ordered temporary support, enough to cover basic expenses but not legal fees. Dallas claimed hardship, despite the family money, despite Laura's resources. The judge, a different one this time, seemed sympathetic, but bound by guidelines. I left with a promise of $1,200 a month and shared health insurance. Emma's patience started fraying, not with me, but with the situation. She'd watch me pump milk at midnight, preparing for visits where I'd prove my motherhood in 3-hour increments. She'd find me reading custody law at 3 a.m., trying to understand how this had happened. One night, she sat beside me and cried too. The 4th supervised visit introduced a wrinkle. Mackenzie had a diaper rash, the kind that happens when caregivers don't change frequently enough. I documented it, treated it, mentioned it to Janet. She wrote it down but reminded me not to make accusations. Everything I said could be twisted. Even protecting my daughter became suspect. Patricia filed an emergency motion about the rash. Dallas's attorney responded that I was manufacturing concerns and attempting to alienate the child from her father. The judge ordered both parties to communicate through a parenting app. Our marriage reduced to timestamps and read receipts. I started photographing everything during visits. Mackenzie's development, her reactions, our interactions, building a counter-narrative to whatever story they were telling. See, the photos said, she knows me, she loves me, I'm her mother. But photos couldn't capture the smell of her hair, or the weight of her in my arms, or the way she said mama when she was tired. Week 4 arrived with news. The supervision center was satisfied with my visits. Janet recommended transitioning to unsupervised time, a small victory that felt enormous. Patricia filed the paperwork immediately, requesting every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. The response came fast. Dallas's attorney claimed I'd been coaching the child and manipulating the supervisor. They requested a psychological evaluation, suggesting postpartum depression made me unstable. The hearing was set for the following week. I sat in Emma's bathroom that night, pumping milk and laughing at the irony. They wanted to evaluate my mental health. Fair enough, let them test me. Let them probe my mind and find what I already knew. I wasn't crazy. I was just a mother who'd been conspired against by the 2 people who should have protected us. But knowing you're sane doesn't make you look sane in court. And Laura had been playing this game much longer than me. The timing of those nursery cameras makes me wonder when exactly Laura started planning this whole thing. Was she collecting evidence from day one? The evaluation was scheduled at a psychologist she'd probably selected, paid for by funds I couldn't match. Another hoop to jump through, another test to pass. Patricia warned me to be careful. Answer honestly, but don't volunteer information. Don't appear too angry or too passive. Show appropriate emotion, but not too much. Be myself, but not too much myself. The perfect mother was a performance, and I was learning my lines. The milk freezer at Emma's was full now. Bags and bags of evidence that my body hadn't gotten the custody memo. I started donating the overflow to the milk bank. At least someone's baby would benefit from what mine couldn't have. The intake nurse looked at my donation volume and asked if I was exclusively pumping. I told her it was complicated. My phone rang constantly those days. Dallas trying to coordinate outside the app. Laura leaving voicemails about doing what's best for everyone. Lawyers, bills collectors, court clerks. I changed my ringtone to something that didn't make me flinch. The psychological evaluation loomed. Patricia coached me on what to expect. Standard tests, interviews, questions about my childhood and marriage and motherhood. They'd look for signs of instability, depression, anger. The psychologist would write a report that could determine my future with Mackenzie. I thought about the last year. The pregnancy where I'd been treated like an incubator. The birth where I'd become invisible. The conspiracy hidden in plain sight. The way love could be weaponized, trust could be evidence, and motherhood could be stolen with enough signatures on the right papers. But I also thought about Mackenzie. Her laugh that sounded like bells. The way she scrunched her nose when she smiled. How she reached for me during visits, recognized my voice, relaxed in my arms. That was real. That was mine. That was worth fighting for. The evaluation was tomorrow. After that, another hearing. After that, another fight. The cycle would continue until someone gave up, and I knew it wouldn't be me. Laura might have Dallas's compliance and expensive lawyers and months of planning, but I had something she didn't. I was Mackenzie's mother. Not because a court said so or papers proved it, but because I'd grown her under my heart, birthed her in pain, loved her with every cell of my body. They could supervise that. They could evaluate it. They could try to quantify it in reports and hearings, but they couldn't erase it, and I wouldn't let them. The psychological evaluation office occupied the 3rd floor of a medical building downtown. I arrived 20 minutes early, hands shaking as I filled out intake forms. The questions probed every corner of my life: childhood trauma, substance use, mental health history. I answered truthfully, knowing lies would surface eventually. Dr. Victoria Chen called me back at exactly 10 a.m. Her office felt deliberately neutral. Beige walls, abstract art, a tissue box positioned strategically on the side table. She explained the process while I tried not to fidget. 3 hours of testing, interviews, standardized assessments. The results would go directly to the court. The first battery of tests measured cognitive function and personality traits. I filled in bubbles, arranged blocks, interpreted ink blots that all looked like custody papers to me. Dr. Chen observed without expression, making notes on her tablet. During the clinical interview, she asked about my pregnancy, my marriage, my relationship with Mackenzie. I kept my answers measured, factual. When she asked about the birthday party incident, I explained without embellishment. She nodded, typed, moved on. The evaluation ended with a parenting assessment. Dr. Chen showed me videos of parent-child interactions and asked me to identify concerning behaviors. Some were obvious: a father shaking a crying infant, a mother ignoring clear distress signals. Others felt like tricks. Was a parent letting a toddler cry for 2 minutes neglectful or teaching self-soothing? I answered based on what I'd learned in the mandatory parenting classes, not what my instincts said. Afterward, I sat in my car in the parking garage, exhausted. Patricia called to check in. The report would take 2 weeks, 2 more weeks of supervised visits, of proving myself in 3-hour increments. I drove to work at the medical clinic, where I filed insurance claims and pretended my life wasn't imploding. That evening, I arrived at the supervision center to find Lara's car in the parking lot. My stomach dropped. She wasn't supposed to be there. Inside, she sat in the waiting room, Mackenzie on her lap. The receptionist explained that Dallas had an emergency, and Lara was the authorized alternative. I had no choice but to accept the handoff from the woman who'd orchestrated my downfall. Lara stood slowly, adjusting Mackenzie on her hip. As she transferred my daughter to my arms, she hummed softly, a lullaby I recognized but couldn't place. Mackenzie fussed at the transition, reaching back toward Lara. The moment was documented by the supervision center staff, another mark against me. During the visit, Mackenzie seemed different, clingy in a way that felt rehearsed. She kept looking toward the door, asking for Gamma, in a voice that broke my heart. Janet noted every instance. When I tried to redirect with toys or books, Mackenzie would participate briefly before returning to the door. 3 hours of my daughter treating me like a stranger while calling for the woman who'd stolen her. The pattern continued for the next 3 visits. Mackenzie's behavior grew more distant, more oriented toward Lara. I mentioned it to Patricia, who filed a motion suggesting coaching. The response came swiftly. Accusations that I was projecting my hostility onto an innocent child and unable to accept the natural bond between grandmother and grandchild. Meanwhile, the financial pressure mounted. The psychological evaluation cost $1,500 I didn't have. Patricia's retainer was depleted. She agreed to payment plans, but warned that she couldn't continue indefinitely without payment. I picked up extra shifts at the clinic, worked weekends at a retail pharmacy. Every dollar went to legal fees or basic survival. Emma started dating someone new, a stable, normal guy named John who didn't understand why she was housing her sister and niece in a custody battle. I heard them arguing through the thin walls. He wanted to move in together, start fresh. She felt obligated to help me. The tension in the apartment grew thick as the August humidity. The daycare situation exploded during week 6. I arrived for a supervised visit to find Mackenzie wasn't there. The center called Dallas, who didn't answer. They called Lara, who arrived 45 minutes later with Mackenzie, claiming there had been a miscommunication about the schedule. But Mackenzie was wearing different clothes than in the morning photos Dallas had posted on the parenting app. When I pointed this out, Lara smiled and said she'd had a little accident and Grandma always kept spare outfits. Patricia filed another emergency motion. The judge ordered all parties to strictly adhere to the visitation schedule. No deviations, no substitutions without prior written consent. It felt like a victory until Lara's attorney filed a cross motion alleging I was creating conflict where none existed and demonstrating an unhealthy fixation on the grandmother's appropriate caregiving. The psychological evaluation results arrived on a Tuesday. Dr. Chen found no evidence of mental illness or personality disorders. However, she noted elevated anxiety consistent with situational stressors and recommended therapy to process the adjustment to changing family dynamics. Lara's team spun this as evidence of instability requiring continued supervision. During this time, I discovered Dallas had enrolled Mackenzie in a new daycare, one where Lara served on the board of directors. When I tried to add myself to the authorized pickup list, I learned I'd need both parents' consent. Dallas refused through the parenting app, citing safety concerns. I was legally Mackenzie's mother, but couldn't pick her up from daycare. The supervised visits became my only lifeline to my daughter. I brought new activities each time, trying to recreate our bond. But Mackenzie had learned to perform too. She'd play nicely for exactly long enough, then dissolve into tears, calling for Glamma or Dada. Janet documented it all: the difficult transitions, the emotional dysregulation, the clear attachment preferences. Patricia warned me that the reports weren't looking good. We needed something concrete, some evidence of manipulation beyond circumstantial patterns. That's when I remembered the nursery cameras. Dallas had installed them, but I'd had access to the app too. Maybe the footage still existed in the cloud. I spent nights hunched over Emma's laptop, trying to recover the deleted videos. Most were gone, but I found fragments, clips that showed Lara alone with Mackenzie during my pregnancy, whispering to my belly when she thought no one was watching. In one, she called the baby Mackenzie and talked about doing it right this time. I didn't understand the reference, but Patricia said it could be significant. The financial hearing arrived with more bad news. The judge reduced my temporary support, accepting Dallas's claim that his income had decreased. I knew he'd gotten a raise. We'd celebrated it during my pregnancy, but couldn't prove it without access to his pay stubs. The $1,200 monthly support became $800, barely enough for gas and groceries, let alone legal fees. Emma's boyfriend John moved in anyway. They gave me 30 days to find alternative housing. I understood. They needed their space, their life, but understanding didn't make it easier. I searched for apartments I couldn't afford, rooms for rent that wouldn't accept a baby during visitation, shelters that had months-long waiting lists. Dallas having an emergency right when Lara shows up seems awfully convenient. The way she hummed that lullaby while holding Mackenzie feels calculated, like she's trying to trigger something specific. Makes me wonder how many other little tricks she's been using during their time together. During week 7, something shifted at the supervision center. A new worker, Sebastian, started overseeing visits. He seemed less rigid than Janet, more interested in actual interactions than checking boxes. When Mackenzie had her usual meltdown calling for Glamma, he redirected her attention naturally, giving us space to reconnect. For the first time in weeks, I had a full visit where my daughter seemed to remember who I was. But the next visit, Janet was back, and so was the performance. I realized they were rotating supervisors when things went too well. Patricia said we couldn't prove it, but the pattern was clear. Good visit with a sympathetic supervisor, followed by a difficult visit with Janet or another strict observer. The reports averaged out to inconsistent interactions requiring continued monitoring. The breaking point came when I discovered Lara had legally changed her name. Not her last name, her first name. She was now going by Mackenzie Lara instead of Lara Mackenzie. The daycare, the pediatrician, everyone called her Mackenzie. When Mackenzie called for Gamma, it sounded like she was saying mama. The confusion was deliberate, calculated. Patricia filed a motion about the name change, arguing it was designed to confuse a toddler and alienate her from her mother. The response was swift and brutal. Lara's attorney accused me of trying to control a grandmother's personal choices and suggested my paranoid fixation on names indicated deteriorating mental health. They requested another psychological evaluation. I couldn't afford another evaluation. I could barely afford gas to get to supervised visits. Emma, stressed by the tension in her home, suggested I consider temporary placement with Lara until I was back on my feet. The betrayal cut deep. Even my sister thought I should give up. During a particularly difficult visit, Mackenzie fell and scraped her knee. As I comforted her, she pushed me away, crying for Kenzie Ma. That's what she called Lara now. Not grandma, not glamma, but Kenzie Ma. One letter away from mama. I looked at Janet documenting the rejection of maternal comfort and felt something inside me break. That night, I called Patricia and asked about voluntary temporary custody arrangements. Maybe if I agreed to let Dallas have primary custody for 6 months while I got stable housing and consistent income, we could revisit. Patricia said it was possible, but warned that temporary often became permanent. Courts liked stability for children. Changes were hard to justify once patterns were established. I spent the next week soul-searching. Was I fighting for Mackenzie or for myself? Was my presence in her life worth a constant upheaval? She seemed happy with Dallas and Lara, confused during transitions, but otherwise thriving. The pediatrician reports showed good health, normal development. Maybe I was the chaos in her life. But then I found the video, deep in my phone's deleted folder, somehow missed when I'd backed up evidence. A video from 2 weeks after Mackenzie's birth, when I was still recovering from the emergency C-section. Lara had visited while Dallas was at work. In the video, she held Mackenzie and whispered, "You're my second chance. My Mackenzie died, but you'll live. You'll be perfect. Mama's here now." The pieces clicked. Mackenzie, Kenzie Ma, the name change. This wasn't about being a grandmother. Lara was replacing her dead daughter with mine. The realization hit like ice water. I forwarded the video to Patricia immediately. Patricia called within minutes. This changed everything. We needed to research Mackenzie, understand what happened. If Lara was projecting a deceased child onto Mackenzie, it established emotional instability that courts couldn't ignore. But we needed more information, more evidence. I spent the night searching online records, obituaries, anything about a Mackenzie who died young. Nothing came up under Lara's current married name, but when I searched her maiden name from an old wedding announcement, I found it. Mackenzie Grace Sullivan, infant daughter of Lara Sullivan, died at 11 months. SIDS. The date was 30 years ago next month. The obituary included a photo, a baby who looked startlingly like Mackenzie. Same dark hair, same shaped eyes. The resemblance was strong enough to be unsettling. I understood now why Lara had fixated on my pregnancy, why she'd documented everything. She wasn't building a custody case. She was recreating her lost daughter. Patricia worked through the night preparing new motions. The name change, the video, the deceased child. It painted a picture of a grandmother unable to distinguish between her granddaughter and her dead daughter. We requested immediate modification of custody orders and a psychological evaluation for Lara. The motion hit the court like a bomb. Dallas's attorney requested an emergency hearing, claiming we were exploiting a family tragedy and weaponizing grief. They admitted Mackenzie had died, but argued it had no bearing on Lara's fitness as a grandmother. If anything, they claimed it made her more protective, more careful. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. In the meantime, supervised visits continued. But now when I looked at Mackenzie calling for Kenzie Ma, I saw the manipulation clearly. Every correction I made was documented as maternal interference. Every time Mackenzie reached for me naturally before remembering her training, I noted it in my journal. That weekend, Emma asked me to move out immediately. John had proposed, and they needed to prepare for their life together. I had nowhere to go. Patricia suggested a women's shelter that worked with mothers in custody disputes. The intake worker said they had space, but warned it would impact my case. Living in a shelter didn't look stable to family courts. I packed what little I had, kissed Emma goodbye, and drove to the shelter with my 2 suitcases and a bag of legal documents. The room was small but clean. A single bed, a crib for when Mackenzie visited, a tiny window overlooking the parking lot. Other mothers nodded in recognition as I passed. We all had the same hollow look of women fighting for our children. The emergency hearing arrived with Dallas and Lara presenting a united front. Their attorney argued that Lara's loss made her uniquely qualified to protect Mackenzie. She understood the fragility of life, the importance of vigilance. The name change was a coincidence. She'd always gone by her middle name. The video was taken out of context during a vulnerable moment of grief. Patricia presented our case methodically. The pattern of alienation, the deliberate confusion of names, the projection of a dead child onto a living one. She requested Lara undergo psychological evaluation to assess whether her unresolved grief posed a risk to Mackenzie's emotional development. Judge Henderson listened to both sides before making her ruling. She ordered psychological evaluations for all parties, me, Dallas, and Lara. She also modified the visitation schedule, granting me unsupervised visits every other weekend pending the evaluation results. It wasn't full custody, but it was progress. As we left the courthouse, Lara approached me in the parking lot. Dallas was loading Mackenzie into the car, out of earshot. She stood close, too close, and spoke quietly. She told me I didn't understand what it was like to lose a child, to wake up every day knowing I could have saved her if I'd just checked one more time. She said Mackenzie was her second chance, and she wouldn't let anyone take that away. I stood frozen as she walked away, her words echoing. The threat was clear, even if the words were carefully chosen. She'd lost one Mackenzie. She wouldn't lose another. And in her mind, Mackenzie had become Mackenzie. The living child had merged with the ghost. That night in the shelter, I lay awake planning. The psychological evaluations would be crucial. Lara's grief, my stability, Dallas's complicity, everything would be examined. I had 6 weeks to prepare, to show I could provide a stable home despite living in a shelter. 6 weeks to prove that love wasn't about money or houses or prestigious preschool. rules, but about seeing a child as herself, not as someone's second chance. The first unsupervised visit was scheduled for the following weekend. 48 hours with my daughter for the first time in months. I prepared carefully. Activities planned but flexible, familiar foods, her favorite toys that I'd managed to keep. When Dallas dropped her off at the shelter, she clung to him, crying for Kenzie Ma. But I had 48 hours to remind her who I was. The visit started rough. Mackenzie was confused by the new environment, asking repeatedly where Gamma's house was. But slowly, without the pressure of observation, without the performance, she began to relax. By Saturday evening, she was laughing at peekaboo. By Sunday morning, she was calling me Mama again. Not Kenzie Ma, Mama. I documented everything with photos and videos, careful to show her happiness without coaching. When Dallas picked her up Sunday evening, she went willingly, but waved bye-bye to me without prompting. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. The psychological evaluation appointments were scheduled for the following month. Dr. Chen would evaluate all 3 adults, looking for signs of instability, projection, or inability to prioritize Mackenzie's needs. Patricia coached me on what to expect, but ultimately, I could only be honest. I was a mother living in a shelter, fighting for my child against a woman who saw my daughter as her dead baby reborn. The truth would have to be enough. I sat in my car reading the custody papers dated 3 days after my emergency C-section. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. when Dallas had visited alone while I was still hooked to monitors, bleeding internally. Inside the house, I heard a crash. Through the window, I saw Lara frantically pressing buttons on her phone, her face crumpling. Why does Lara still have Mackenzie's baby photo 30 years later, ready to compare? The timing of that Sid's death being exactly 30 years ago next month feels oddly specific. Makes me wonder what else Lara's been planning around that anniversary date. She just deleted the only video of Mackenzie's first steps while trying to forward it to her prayer group. The next morning at 7 a.m., we both arrived at the daycare simultaneously. I reached for the sign-in clipboard, but the receptionist pulled it away. My name had been removed from the authorized pickup list yesterday afternoon, exactly when I'd been at my court-mandated therapy session. Lara hummed softly while we waited for the director, the same lullaby she'd sung in the delivery room while I hemorrhaged, and the nurses rushed around me. My accusation came out slurred from 3 nights without sleep. The daycare director's eyes narrowed as I stumbled over words, my exhaustion making me appear intoxicated. She made notes on her clipboard, mandated reporter protocols. Lara stood there looking concerned, the perfect grandmother worried about an unstable mother. My phone buzzed. Emma needed help moving immediately. Her ex was escalating, but she'd only trust someone who had their life together, not her sister in a custody battle. The only lawyer who could see me this month had an opening in 2 hours. I stood in the daycare parking lot, calculating distances and time. Helping Emma meant missing the legal consultation that could save my case. I chose my sister. As I loaded boxes, Lara's hand trembled when she touched her abdomen, the same spot where her C-section scar from 30 years ago still ached. She'd told Dallas about it once, how phantom pains hit her whenever she remembered Mackenzie's birth. Missing that lawyer appointment gave Lara a 6-week advantage in court scheduling. While I helped Emma escape, my car got booted for unpaid tickets I'd accumulated driving to supervised visits. My phone died. The clerk's office closed at 4:30. I used Emma's ex's truck to finish the move, not thinking about consequences. The police pulled us over for a routine check. The plates came back to a man with a restraining order. I sat in the back of the patrol car explaining while the officer ran my license. My act of kindness became evidence of poor judgment, associating with dangerous individuals. At the courthouse the next day, Lara had a genuine panic attack in the security line. Her breathing went ragged as she clutched her chest, remembering her daughter who died at Mackenzie's current age. Security guards rushed to help. Other visitors offered water. Everyone saw a grieving grandmother, not a woman stealing my child. During the handoff, Mackenzie reached for Lara. I heard the whisper escape Lara's lips. Come to mama. The exact phrase she'd used with her first Mackenzie. Muscle memory from 30 years ago. Activated by a toddler's outstretched arms, my pregnancy journal sat visible in Lara's open purse. I reached for it instinctively, then froze. The temporary restraining order she'd filed 2 weeks ago made touching her belongings a violation. Evidence of her theft sat inches away, legally untouchable. The mediator watched me photograph the purse's contents. Her report would note aggressive documentation of the grandmother's personal items. The pediatrician's office called. They needed Lara's signature for Mackenzie's vaccines because Dallas had added her to the insurance during my psychiatric hold. The dates lined up. While I'd been restrained in the hospital, convinced my baby wasn't real, he'd been filing paperwork to replace me. Patricia pulled me aside after court. The psychiatric hold records had surfaced. 3 days after delivery, I'd tried climbing out the hospital window, insisting they'd switched my baby. The notes described me as delusional, combative, danger to self, postpartum psychosis, treated with antipsychotics and restraints. Every word would be weaponized against me. Screenshots from the neighborhood Facebook group circulated among the lawyers. My 3 a.m. posts during the psychotic episode. They switched my baby. This isn't my child. The real Mackenzie is somewhere else. Neighbors remembered. They'd watched me pace the street in a hospital gown, searching for my real baby. Every attempt to document Lara's behavior got flagged as stalking by those same neighbors. They remembered my breakdown, saw my current behavior through that lens. The woman who'd insisted her baby was switched now claimed the grandmother was stealing her child. Pattern of delusion, they whispered. Lara controlled pediatrician access completely. She'd been listed as emergency contact during my hospitalization, and Dallas never updated the forms. Every well check, every vaccine, every milestone happened under her supervision. I got summaries through the parenting app, clinical notes about my daughter's development. 3 nights without sleep led to a slip. At daycare drop-off, I called my daughter Mackenzie instead of Mackenzie. The teacher's face changed immediately. She made a note, reported it to the director. The mother who'd insisted her baby was switched now couldn't remember her child's actual name. My friend Jenna pulled away when her husband reminded her about my breakdown. She believed I was better now, but the sentence never finished. Better now meant I'd been worse before. Worse meant dangerous. Dangerous meant distance. The grocery clerk asked if I was taking my medication while I bought formula. The question came kindly, with concern. My postpartum psychosis had become town knowledge, discussed over coffee and playground benches. Everyone knew about the woman who'd tried to climb out a hospital window looking for her real baby. Lara's version of events matched hospital records perfectly. She'd visited during my psychosis, tried to help, witnessed my delusions firsthand. Her concern looked genuine because it had been genuine. She'd watched me insist Mackenzie wasn't my child while nurses sedated me. My coworker at the clinic admitted Lara had paid for her daughter's surgery years ago. She owed her loyalty, couldn't testify against someone who'd saved her child. The network of obligation ran deep through our small town. Proving Lara lied required admitting I'd accessed my sealed medical records through Dallas's old passwords. Truth required confessing to a crime. Patricia advised against it. Illegally obtained evidence was inadmissible and would add criminal charges to my problems. The private investigator photographed me sharing wine with Emma after the move. One glass to celebrate her freedom became evidence of drinking problems. The photo showed exhaustion and alcohol, a dangerous combination for a mother with a history of psychosis. Court filings revealed Dallas's real position. He sought sole custody with Lara as stabilizing presence. The woman who'd lost her own Mackenzie would protect this Mackenzie. His fear was real, documented, reasonable. Lara started dating Patricia's widowed father. They met at grief counseling, bonded over lost children. She quoted Mackenzie's favorite book naturally in conversation. 30-year-old memories fresh as yesterday. Patricia had to withdraw from my case. Conflict of interest. During depositions, Lara and I gave different accounts of my psychotic break. She described violence, threats, danger. I remembered confusion, fear, desperate searching for my real baby. Both versions were true. Psychosis meant I couldn't trust my own memories. Text messages from pregnancy surfaced. During intrusive thoughts, I'd message Dallas, I want to hurt the baby. What if I drop her on purpose? These thoughts won't stop. OCD intrusive thoughts, my therapist had explained, but without context, they looked like threats. Lara showed Mackenzie photos from my hospitalization. Security cameras had captured me restrained, screaming, fighting nurses. Mackenzie cried and pulled away when I reached for her the next visit. She pointed at me and repeated what she'd been told. Scary. Lara had shown her the book of photos, teaching her to fear her mother. Nanny cam footage showed worse. During a dissociative episode, I'd stood over Mackenzie's crib at 3 a.m., staring blankly for 17 minutes. I had no memory of it. The video showed a woman in a fugue state, standing motionless over a baby. Any jury would convict based on that image alone. The court ordered a full psychological evaluation. 8 to 12 weeks wait, $3,000 I didn't have. Without it, no progress on custody. With it, risk of findings that could end my case entirely. I used Dallas's passwords one more time. His browser history revealed everything. Forum posts dating back to my pregnancy. Is my wife showing signs of psychosis? When to leave a mentally ill spouse? Protecting children from psychotic mothers. He'd been planning since I'd said the baby felt wrong at 7 months pregnant. Lara's Pinterest board, Helping Mackenzie, started during my hospitalization. Infant care tips, developmental milestones, grandparent rights articles. She'd been researching while I'd been sedated, building her case while I fought delusions. My therapist got subpoenaed. Privileged information became public record when child safety was involved. She testified about my statement during a dark moment. Sometimes I think the baby would be better off without me. Context didn't matter. The words stood alone. My color-coded binder impressed the new lawyer but worried the judge. Hundreds of pages, cross-referenced, highlighted, tabbed. Evidence of thorough documentation or obsessive behavior. The same organization that showed dedication also suggested mania. The 3 p.m. pickup became a power play. My evaluation appointment ran over. Lara waited at daycare with witnesses. Every minute late became evidence of irresponsibility. Choose mental health treatment or punctuality. Either choice was wrong. The daycare worker who'd supported me got fired after Lara's board complaint. Enabling delusions, the termination letter said. Her license was threatened. She had 3 kids of her own. At the hearing, she testified for Lara's character instead. Self-preservation over truth. The postpartum psychosis angle is clever. Medical records from 3 days after birth showing she thought her baby was switched. My grandmother's ring sparkled on Lara's finger. Dallas had given it to her for safekeeping during my hospitalization. Heirloom theft in plain sight, but legal. Everything taken while I was psychotic was justified as protection. Lara offered a deal. Admit I'd experienced psychosis and needed ongoing treatment. She'd support unsupervised visits. Refuse to acknowledge my illness. She'd push for termination of rights. Admit mental illness or lose my child. An impossible choice. My refusal got framed as denial, refusing help, lacking insight into my condition. Mentally ill mothers who won't admit they're sick are the most dangerous, her lawyer argued. My sanity became evidence of insanity. Discovery revealed the worst betrayal. Dallas hadn't signed papers during labor. He'd gotten them notarized while I was in restraints, using a mobile notary who came to the hospital. I'd attacked him during the psychotic episode, thinking he was an intruder trying to steal my baby. He'd used that moment to steal my rights instead. Both lawyers found Dallas's journal, page after page documenting my deterioration, his growing fear, his mother's offers to help. Her opportunism looked like concern. His terror looked justified. My illness had created the perfect storm for legal theft. My proof of manipulation showed something different to outside eyes. Videos of Lara trying to calm me during episodes, protecting Mackenzie from a delusional mother. Every piece of evidence cut both ways. Emma faced her own choice: support her sister or protect her relationship with stable family members. She couldn't have Mackenzie growing up thinking mental illness ran in the family. The stigma might affect her own future children. She chose distance. Without Emma, I had only my mother with dementia. She lived in memory care, confused about time. Sometimes she thought I was 12. Sometimes she thought Mackenzie was me as a baby. Her testimony would hurt more than help. I started mirroring Lara's tactics, arriving early to every event, establishing presence. First at doctor appointments, library story time, mommy and me classes, claiming primary caregiver status through consistent presence, fighting fire with fire. The grief support group met Thursdays at the community center. I joined quietly, sat in the back, listened to stories of loss. Lara talked about Mackenzie every week. 11 months old, SIDS, found her blue in the crib. 30 years later, she still checked breathing obsessively. I took notes while pretending to cry. Dallas's hammered texts arrived at 2 a.m. Admissions of guilt, his mother's manipulation, how she'd promised to help raise the baby if he documented my illness. Patricia's father's new lawyer subpoenaed the phone records. Evidence obtained legally this time. Dallas's ex-girlfriend emerged from nowhere. Lara had promised to help them reconcile if she testified about his pattern of choosing unstable women. First wife, anxiety disorder. Second girlfriend, bipolar. Now me, postpartum psychosis. The pattern looked damning until you realized Lara had introduced him to all of us. Fighting 2 fronts meant missing appointments. The psychological evaluation got rescheduled 6 weeks out, marked non-compliant in my file. Every missed deadline became evidence of instability. My credit cards maxed out out on legal fees. The pawn shop gave me $900 for my engagement ring, enough for one more filing. I wore the tan line like a battle scar. Library story time became a silent standoff. Laura and I sat on opposite sides of the room while Mackenzie looked between us, confused. Other parents whispered. The librarian's hand hovered over the phone, ready to call security. We smiled frozen smiles while our daughter wondered why she had two mothers claiming her. The nursing job ended with termination for excessive absences. Patient care suffered when nurses missed shifts for custody hearings. My replacement started the next week. Laura's friend's daughter, fresh from nursing school. The network tightened around me. Emma's basement grew mold that winter. Black spots spread across the ceiling while I developed a cough that wouldn't quit. At court appearances, I hacked into tissues while Laura looked concerned. The judge noted my apparent illness. My mother's dementia created the worst moment. During her testimony, she confused past and present, told the judge I'd tried to hurt babies. She meant dolls when I was 3, playing too rough. But the words stood in court records. My own mother saying I hurt babies. My complaint about daycare procedures triggered an investigation. They found minor violations, improper bleach ratios, 1 expired license. Nothing related to my concerns. The daycare got a warning, but Laura spun it as me attacking innocent businesses. The owner asked why I destroyed her reputation over a custody dispute. Parent Facebook groups turned against the daycare. Enrollment dropped. 2 teachers got laid off. My search for justice had jobless casualties. I continued anyway because Mackenzie mattered more than collateral damage. Emma asked the question I'd been avoiding. What if I really had been dangerous during psychosis? The blank spots in my memory haunted me. What had I done in those missing hours? How could I swear I was safe when I couldn't remember? Public admission felt like defeat. Yes, I'd experienced postpartum psychosis. Yes, I'd been hospitalized. Yes, I needed ongoing treatment. But I was recovered, stable, safe. The more I insisted on my sanity, the less sane I appeared. Hospital records destroyed me. During the worst episode, I'd handed Mackenzie to a nurse saying, "Take it away." Not her. It. I'd called my daughter it while begging someone to remove her from my sight. How could I claim motherhood after that? Laura's lawyer filed emergency motions while my legal aid attorney juggled 200 other cases. 15 minutes to prepare for hearings that decided my future. Justice wasn't blind. It was overworked and underfunded. The revelation about Mackenzie changed everything. Laura's daughter had died at 11 months from SIDS. She'd found her blue one morning, tried CPR, failed. 30 years of guilt drove her obsession with protecting this Mackenzie. Never letting her guard down might save this one. I almost mentioned Laura's anxiety medication in court. The words formed on my tongue. How could she judge my mental health while taking Xanax? But I stopped, horrified at myself. I was becoming what they said I was. Vindictive, cruel, using mental health as a weapon. Mirror practice became my evening ritual. Stable mother face. Appropriate emotional range. Not too happy, not too sad, not too angry, not too passive. The authentic me dissolved into performance art. Dallas's hammered texts provided the first real evidence. Admissions of his mother's manipulation, her promises, her plans. My new lawyer subpoenaed phone records, built a timeline. Small victory in an ocean of defeats. Seeing Laura at the cemetery broke something in me. She knelt at a small headstone, Mackenzie Grace, 1994 to 1995, sobbing like the wound was fresh. Talking to her baby about the other Mackenzie, the living one. My anger curdled into pity. The guardian ad litem recommended graduated reunification, 1 hour monthly supervised, increasing slowly based on compliance. A crumb disguised as a meal. I smiled and thanked her for the opportunity to prove myself. Everything hinged on the psychological evaluation I couldn't afford. Without it, no progress. With it, risk of findings that could end everything. Catch 22 with my daughter as stakes. My past kindness became a weapon against me. I'd sent flowers on Mackenzie's death anniversary after Dallas mentioned it. Laura twisted it. I'd known their pain and named my baby Mackenzie anyway. Deliberate cruelty, she claimed. Salt in wounds. Every family lawyer in the county had conflicts of interest. Laura's charity work touched everyone. She'd funded the women's shelter, the legal aid clinic, the children's advocacy center. Her generosity created a web of obligation I couldn't penetrate. Legal research offered one hope. Past mental illness wasn't automatically disqualifying. I needed to prove current stability, not past perfection. The burden of proof required showing clear and present danger, not historical episodes. My father's old law partner agreed to help pro bono. He warned me honestly. Juries don't forget psychosis. The image of a mother trying to climb out a window stays with people. Facts matter less than fear. He filed motions anyway. Couldn't promise more than improved visitation. Sole custody was fantasy. Shared custody was ambitious. Regular visitation was realistic. I adjusted my dreams downward. Discovery revealed Dallas's exit planning started early. 7 months pregnant, I'd said the baby felt wrong. Normal pregnancy anxiety to me, red flag to him. He'd started documenting, preparing, protecting himself from a wife he feared might snap. His journal entries showed genuine terror mixed with guilt. He loved me but couldn't risk our child. Each strange comment I made got recorded, analyzed, feared. My husband had been scared of me for months before I gave birth. The leaked psychiatric assessment was clinical, damning. Features consistent with recovered postpartum psychosis requiring ongoing monitoring. Recovered but not cured. Monitoring forever. The stigma would never leave. Functional but fragile, the report said. Stress could trigger relapse. Any mother faced stress. Every custody hearing, every supervised visit, every moment of this fight increased my risk. Fighting for my daughter might be what cost me my daughter. I made the hardest choice. Full transparency about intrusive thoughts during pregnancy and postpartum. Yes, I'd thought about hurting her. No, I'd never acted on it. Yes, the thoughts scared me. No, they didn't make me dangerous. OCD intrusive thoughts happened to many mothers. Mine just happened during psychosis. Laura overplayed her hand. She claimed I still hallucinated based on misreading the report. Her lawyer had to walk it back when my lawyer provided the full context. First real mistake she'd made. I presented evidence calmly while Laura grew agitated. She kept saying, "Protect Mackenzie from happening again." The slip was subtle but significant. Protect Mackenzie from what happened to Mackenzie. In her mind, they'd merged. The judge noted Laura's concerning fixation on the name coincidence. Why had she changed her name to Mackenzie? Why call herself Kenzie Ma? The grandmother who'd lost Mackenzie was trying to become Mama to Mackenzie. Court ordered family therapy for all parties. Dallas, Laura, and me, working with a specialist in custody and trauma. No final decisions until therapy reports came back. The courtroom packed with two armies. My side, postpartum psychosis psychosis support group members who'd recovered and raised children. Laura's side. Grief group members who'd lost babies and understood her fear. Mothers who'd survived versus mothers who'd lost. The divide was visible, painful. Both women showed battle scars. My hair had fallen out in chunks from stress. Laura had gained 40 pounds, grief weight she'd carried for 30 years. We faced each other across the courtroom, both fighting for the same child for different reasons. Truth emerged slowly. Dallas loved me, but my psychosis broke him. Watching me restrained, sedated, insisting our baby wasn't real, it shattered something. His mother offered safety, stability, sanity. He'd chosen fear over love. Laura's therapist admitted encouraging protective measures during my hospitalization. She couldn't watch another baby die. Mackenzie's breathing, her color, her movements, all triggered Laura's trauma. Hypervigilance born from ultimate loss. The judge ordered immediate psychiatric evaluations for everyone, not just me. Dallas's enabling, Laura's projection, my recovery, all needed assessment. Equal playing field finally. My journal got authenticated as evidence. Page after page showing deterioration from normal anxiety to full psychosis, but also showing recovery, insight, treatment compliance, proof of illness and wellness both. Evidence proved both women's trauma affected judgment. I'd been psychotic, might relapse. Laura was traumatized, might project. Both loved Mackenzie. Both could harm her through that love. No perfect guardian existed. Laura's therapy notes got subpoenaed. Private sessions where she'd admitted seeing Mackenzie and Mackenzie, where she'd said holding the baby felt like getting her daughter back, where grief and love tangled into something dangerous. The judge offered me the chance to propose custody arrangements. I thought about Mackenzie's needs, not my wants. Graduated reunification with therapy requirements for everyone. Individual therapy, family therapy, parenting therapy, healing before custody, shared custody with therapeutic supervision, starting small, building trust, proving stability, increasing time as everyone healed. Mackenzie needed all of us healthy more than she needed any of us full-time. The family divided predictably. Half thought I was dangerous. The mother who went psychotic, who'd tried to climb out windows, who'd called her baby it, half understood postpartum psychosis, knew recovery was possible, believed in second chances. I rebuilt slowly. Some relatives refused contact, protecting themselves from association with mental illness. Others who'd survived postpartum depression, anxiety, psychosis reached out. I found new family in shared experience, understanding born from similar battles, court monitoring for 2 years minimum, regular assessments, therapy reports, home visits, privacy exchanged for access. I'd live in a fishbowl to see my daughter. The final order reflected reality. I'd live with permanent psychiatric monitoring, but increasing time with Mackenzie. Dallas admitted his fear had been both justified and manipulated by his grief-stricken mother. Laura would get therapy for unresolved grief while having supervised grandparent time. I'd join postpartum psychosis advocacy, knowing I'd always be the mom who went psychotic to some. But Mackenzie would thrive with her village of imperfect people who loved her, all healing from different wounds. Everyone needing therapy equally makes me wonder if the judge sees something deeper here that we're not getting. Anyways, that's the end of that. See you all in the next story.